voice of FinTech.
This episode of the Financial Market Series is brought to you by SIX, the Swiss Exchange Group. If you would like to learn more about SIX, please go to www.six-group.com.
Hello and welcome to Voice of FinTech. Today we're joined by Neil Thomas, who is the head of sales in Asia and country head of Singapore and Japan for SIX, and Jonas Thuerig, who is head of F10 in Singapore. And we're going to talk about what's going on in Asia in terms of open innovation, financial markets, financial infrastructure, and the startup scene and economy. So welcome, Neil and Jonas. Hopefully you are doing well today. How are you?
Great, thanks. Yeah, really nice to have a chance to speak to you, Rudy.
Yeah, doing well. Thank you, Rudy, for organizing this.
So thank you for making the time. Let me start with Neil. I just wanted to understand, first of all, what is your role in Asia, right? I mean, SIX is a Swiss exchange group. You have an outpost in Singapore. What is your mandate and what are the key objectives for SIX in the region?
Yeah, so my role here is in two parts, really. So you're right, I look after the sales for our financial information business, so our data business, which is spread across lots of our customers here. And I also am the regional head for our wider SIX business in the region. So I'm the representative for SIX in Asia.
What sort of services are you selling in Asia? What's the linkage to Switzerland as well?
I mean, we have a lot of our, obviously, major Swiss customers and shareholders have large operations in Asia. So our role out here is to ensure that their business is fully supported, delivering data services, looking at other areas that we can support them from innovation, exchange services, and other initiatives that we have coming up. My role is really to make sure that they're aware of these, make sure we can present them and see how we can support them as they try and grow in Asia alongside ourselves.
Right. And you've been in Asia for quite a while now. So what are your lessons learned so far? I mean, if you compare the state of financial services or the infrastructure developments in Asia versus Europe.
Yeah, I've been out here 2.5 years and it has been really interesting, actually. So I've really noticed that the pace at which things happen seems to be quicker. And I think that's part of you look at the growth that's happened in Asia over the last 5-10 years, it's kind of kept pace with that. And it's been really fascinating to see how SIX has had to adapt its business to meet kind of the different way that Asia approaches financial services.
And Jonas, you've also spent some time in Asia by now, right? So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I am maybe a bit biased towards China, where I spent the past 2 years. I only arrived 4 months ago here in Singapore, but maybe a bit from the FinTech and innovation side, what I'm seeing, there are some differences between Europe and Asia. So Europe is very much a bottom-up approach to innovation, whereas here it's very much a top-down approach. So it's really a government-led approach to innovation. And another thing I think is more important here than in Europe is having the right relationships. So that's also something I really experienced in the past bit more than 2 years.
Right. So maybe that's a question for Neil again, whether that's related to relationships or just the state of the economy. I mean, you're country head of Singapore and Japan, right? I mean, one, an ambitious city-state growing rapidly, the other one, a huge country, a huge economy, but mature. So how does that affect your business or also the state of innovation and things like that?
Yeah, so I think from Singapore, it's our hub for the whole of the APAC region, actually. And when you look at Singapore and Switzerland, actually, they're two countries which are very closely aligned. If you really look at them as their economies, they're both very much driven by financial services. They are both very similar sized populations. They really focus on having central banks at the core to what they do. And I think that lends very well. So we really look for Singapore. We look at that as an area where the regulator really likes to invest in the financial services industry, particularly in innovation. And I think that really is one of these areas that we really like to focus on and try and drive. Japan is very different. For us, Japan is about working with that in that local market, it's about driving it Japan from Japan, where Singapore, we more look at the rest of Asia as a whole. We look at APAC for SIX as one region, and we try and bring those two areas together where we can find synergy. But the Japan, for obvious reasons like the language, for example, we have a very local team who really drive that business, but yet they still lend from each other to understand where can we find synergies? Is there any crossover, for example, with the data offerings, and how can we sort of leverage each other's knowledge? Because a lot of Japanese banks are clearly global, and there's a lot of Japanese banks in Singapore, and there's a lot of initiatives coming out of Singapore which are trying to develop Japan market. So I find a lot of crossover, but we have to treat them differently in the respect to how our approach and our style.
Right, understood. Makes sense. Well, SIX is the core corporate partner for F10, right? In Zurich, but now in Singapore as well. So what was the rationale for opening up a hub in Asia this year?
We're really looking to support innovation in general, but clearly we want to support our major customers and our shareholders in innovating in the region. So we've had a great program in Switzerland for 4 or 5 years now, and we've done a couple of hackathons out here, and the uptake from the startups and from the entrepreneurs in the region was really, really energizing. Actually, it was great to see. We did a big one in 2018 and another one in 2019. And off the back of that, there was other corporate partners, SIX as well. So a lot of startups which are going to be of interest to us. And we thought, well, how can we further these relationships? How can we develop our own products and our services for ourselves and for that of our customers? So we felt that, having a proper base in Singapore helps us really show our commitment to the community out here, as well as adding a lot of additional benefit and value to SIX.
Right. And Jonas, you're the first head of F10 in Singapore. So can you explain the program in Singapore? What are the similarities or differences versus Zurich program or multiple programs that are run in Zurich?
Yes, of course. First and foremost, we really also want to build an ecosystem as we have successfully done it in Zurich. But we are taking basically the best of Zurich over and start with that. So we have now started with our P2 prototype to product program in May. It's a 6-month incubation program for early stage FinTech, InsurTech, and RegTech startups. We have selected 10 very interesting startups for that program here in Singapore. And it's an ongoing program at the moment. It will last for 6 months until the end of October. Later this year, we're actually also going to launch a program called the Scale-Up program. It's actually a program that we have launched in Zurich just a few months ago. It's for later stage startups that are in a scaling up phase. And we're going to do that as well here in Singapore, as we see a lot of value for our corporates, and we see a lot of scale-ups here that are very, very interesting. We really try to take the best from the programs in Zurich and then localize it for Southeast Asia.
And what kind of startups are you looking for? FinTech is a very broad category, right? So do you have a particular subsector focus that you're looking for? Or, obviously the programs are designed along the life cycle of the company or the startup. But in terms of themes or the topics, are there any that you think are a better fit or a high priority for you in Asia?
Good question. I mean, the way how we select the startups, it's really in collaboration with our corporate members. So whatever, for example, SIX or Julius Baer or R3 are looking into, these are startups that we want to have in our program, because we are really that matchmaking ecosystem where we bring the startups together with the corporate. So if the startups work on solutions that don't make any sense to our corporates, then probably startup won't get as much out of the program as others. But for example, for the current cohort, we have startups in digital assets, in data analytics, and we have 2 RegTech startups, and we have a very interesting startup in the payment space. So it's quite broad, but it's always linked to kind of what our corporates, where they want to innovate, where they want to evolve and get better.
Okay, understood. And how do you see the startup scene in Switzerland or Europe versus Asia? I think, that goes for both of you from the perspective of an incumbent or the infrastructure provider, and also a hub that helps the startup.
For example, for Singapore, as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty much a government-led approach. For example, the regulator MAS, they put very favorable innovation policies in place. There are significant government subsidies which the fintechs, the startups can have access to. Also, there are big subsidies for corporates actually to be more innovative. And then, of course, the geographical location. Singapore is really a gateway to nearly 600 people living in Southeast Asia, which is just a really good location. In Europe, on the other hand, as I mentioned also, it's more a bottom-up approach. And I would say we have several fintech hubs in Europe, such as Zurich, London, Frankfurt, who are leading the way.
And Neil, what do you think in terms of fintechs trying to either disrupt the incumbents or cooperate with them? Do you see that that's a big of a trend in Asia versus Europe, where you worked before, or not really? It depends on case by case.
I think, it's on a case-by-case basis. I think there's clearly some startups who are looking to come and find how they can make their initiative be adopted or adapt into the workflow of a bank, or for a financial infrastructure provider, or a data provider. And there are others who really are looking to come at it and change a process, change the way that things are done, disrupt. And I think both are attractive. Really, it's about getting a collaboration together to see what's right and how can we support each other on that journey, and offering them the information, the skills that they need to develop. A lot of it's really interesting. You see a lot of people who come onto these programs with very diverse teams, from all over the world. So they might come onto a Singapore-based program, but actually, the team members are from across Asia, but across Europe as well. So there's a real mix, and I think that's quite a nice balance, where a lot of these people are looking to straddle two continents really, and they're looking to solve a problem or find a new way of doing something for a global audience really. And I've really found that the makeup of the teams has been really interesting and actually very, very, very positive.
Well, that's great, because I always say to people that, if you have a fintech or a tech startup, you should think globally, that's for sure. And the only way to get there is through having a diverse team, right?
Yeah, I completely agree.
So, Jonas, I know that you had lots of applications for your first program, and obviously I see the pattern here in kind of, let's say, agile expansion, right? Having first hackathons in Asia, and then having basically a presence on the ground. But in those last few months, how did you find those startups? I mean, did you do some events? I guess, obviously this year has been difficult for in-person events, so probably you have to change to virtual ones. So how did you go about, let's say, promoting people to apply?
Yeah, actually, luckily, the whole application process was kicked off already last year. So we basically closed the application round in mid of January. That was all pre-COVID, so that was good for us. So that we could do the promotion. We went to different events. We really have a broad network now, especially, of course, in Europe, but also here, that we have built in the past few years while we attended the hackathons. So yeah, we managed to actually do the whole scouting prior to COVID, and now the whole selection process was then a bit different. So that was very much a virtual process. But I mean, really finding these startups, we had over 300 applications, and that works through our networks. We are also using different service providers which are specialized in scouting for startups. So we have different channels to reach out to, and that worked quite well, I have to say, for this cohort.
Okay. And how did the selection process work? Not in terms of, logistics, but in terms of a mindset. I mean, you mentioned already that the startups are better off if they have a fit between their idea and the corporate members' priorities. But what else are you looking for in a startup so that they can be admitted to your program?
Yeah, so we are looking at a number of things. Of course, besides the idea, the areas they're working on, we are also looking at the background of the founders. For us, it's also important that the startups have a runway of at least 6 months, 6 to 9 months, so they can really focus on the program while being part of the F10 and don't have to run after VCs and investors during the program. So there are a number of criterias, and then we do lots of interviews. We have different people from F10 talking to the startups during the selection, but we also have the corporates to come in and question these startups, as well as our broad mentor network, which are industry experts that help us selecting the right startup. So it's quite an effort. It takes a couple of days, but it secures the quality that we want, the kind of startups we want to have in our program.
And how does economics work? I mean, do you provide financial support? Do you provide co-working space? Do you take equity or not?
Yeah, we do. So we do provide here in Singapore, we do provide 20,000 Singapore dollars for the startups to cover expenses during the program. As the program is basically structured into different masterclasses, so basically the startups come together for a week or two every month, where we work very much on from ideation to prototyping all the way to getting them investor ready. So they get a lot from the program itself. They get access to our corporate partners and to our broader ecosystem. And we do provide them co-working space. That obviously hasn't happened yet due to the current pandemic. But once we can go back to a co-working space, we will definitely do that. And we will be sitting together with our startups. Concerning the equity, yes, we do take equity. We take 4% equity in the next financing round.
Right. And how does monitoring of the startups work? Some people say, well, we cannot ask them to provide us KPIs like from a company that existed for 150 years. On the other hand, well, you need to have certain milestones, right? You need to have an idea whether startups are on the right track or not. So what's your philosophy and how do you do it? I mean, once you're in the program in F10, it's not necessarily guaranteed that you will graduate, so to speak, right? So how does that work in Singapore?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's similar to the setup in Zurich. So we have basically 4 milestones that the startups have to reach. They have a lot of different kinds of deliverables, which are actually very useful to the startups themselves, but then of course also for us to validate whether they deliver what they're promising. And I mean, the key metric basically to graduate from the program and to be an alumni of the F10 is basically having at the end of the program at least a letter of intent signed with a potential customer. In that way, we can really ensure our extremely high survival rate of over 95% among the startups that graduated from the program.
But it's 95% over what time period?
So it's basically 95% of the startups that graduated from the program in the past 5 years. You can ask me again in a year how the numbers look like, but we have extremely high numbers. I agree, but it's the truth. So that's what we have achieved over the past 5 years.
No, great stuff, obviously. So how do you see the pandemic changing the financial services and focusing on Asia in the near term and the longer term? Maybe let's start with Neil.
Well, it's a big question. I mean, one I would love to really know, but I think clearly there's going to be some changes to just the way that people interact now. I mean, everybody's been working largely in a virtual landscape for the last, for my colleagues in Japan, for example, have been since January this year, have been working from home and doing all of their meetings virtually. And I think that, I think it's safe to say that trend is going to carry on. I think most people there'll be a lot more virtual interaction, a lot more focus on delivering projects and and KPIs and targets, and a lot of this interaction will be done virtually. But I think that won't be wholesale, though. I think a lot of companies are looking to get people back into the offices. I think, as I was reading something interesting today about creativity coming by working in teams and groups together. And I think that's going to come back. But there clearly will be an impact on the financial services, just on the economy itself. I mean, the numbers have been quite alarming, and we'll see what happens. But in the form of how is this going to evolve? I think really from an Asia perspective, I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how countries then start to focus, and when travel opens up, how to start to collaborate again, try to grow ecosystems, maintain them, look at new ways of supporting business in a virtual environment, but as well as looking at ways how can we sort out supply chains. I think there's been an impact to global supply chain as well. So there's lots of different factors which I think are going to come in. From an infrastructure point of view, we have to focus on what we can do well, which is offer reliability, stability to our customers and shareholders, making sure that we deliver quality. And I think, that's really the core of what's going to be, we're going to be relying on for the next 2 to 5 years.
Right. And Jonas, do you think this whole thing will impact startups negatively only or positively? Some people say there are certain sectors that will benefit, some will suffer. How do you see it? I mean, where are you on the optimism versus pessimism scale?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of opportunities as well, given the current situation. So I believe in the financial service industry now, the incumbents, they need to be more cost efficient. They are looking for solutions that currently startups are developing. So we've seen quite a bit of traction, even among our startups in the current cohort, for solutions where they automate certain processes. So I see actually a lot of opportunities for startups that are working in that area. For startups that are working in areas that are maybe less of a priority right now, projects will be put on hold for a while. So for those, that might be more difficult. So there are opportunities, but also threats for the startups, depending on what you're developing. In terms of raising money, of course, it's not the best time. So you want to make sure that you can show some traction for your startup. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to raise money at the moment. Yeah, so it's a tough environment for sure. We're trying to help our startups as much as possible, but I hope towards the end of the year or early next year, things will be better again for the startup ecosystems. And we also see actually a lot of support, at least here from the government side, who's really helping the ecosystem to stay alive and stay healthy. So
fingers crossed. Neil, where can interested parties find out more about what SIX does in Asia, what kind of services you have, and what kind of people would you like to hear from most?
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking and keen to hear from people who can support our growth in Asia. So we're really really keen on the digital asset space. We're really interested in data, AI to support data, data analytics. Areas like that are of huge interest to SIX. We are all easily found. So if you go onto the SIX website, SIX Group website, you can find us in Asia. But via LinkedIn, you can find myself and our colleagues. But we have, as I say, we have an office in Singapore, and we're always pleased to hear from people. And they can email me. You get hold of my details off LinkedIn and get in touch. I speak to a lot of people all the time. Yeah, but it's easy to find us. We're active in the market, and we reach out to a lot of people, particularly through Jonas and F10.
Great. And Jonas, I mean, what's in store for you? I mean, now that you have a program kind of up and running in this new environment, what's coming, and therefore, what kind of people would you like to hear from going forward for the rest of the year?
Yeah, so we are really up and running now in Singapore, although it's virtual. So we are looking for people that want to join our ecosystem, whether it's corporates, whether it's mentors, whether it's investors, whether it's startups. So I'm really connecting now the dots here in Singapore, and also helping them to connect the dots back to Switzerland in that sense. So people can find us on f10.ch. or they can find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest to get in touch with me.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Neil and Jonas, and good luck to 6 and F10 in Singapore.
Thank you, Rudy.
Thank you, Rudy. Great to speak to you.
This episode of the Financial Markets Series was brought to you by SIX, the Swiss Exchange Group. If you would like to learn more about SIX, please go to six-group.com.